Hello everyone, my name is Willie Woods and I am 39 years old and I am formerly homeless and I live in transitional housing at the moment, waiting to get my own place. I was the guy that was never gonna be homeless because homelessness was a choice. So I was really working really hard on developing my career and making sure that I excelled and having my little money that I saved to the side. I actually spent about 10 years in the financial banking industry. I pretty much was ready to actually have my own location, be in charge, be big man on campus. And then I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. What ended up happening was I literally could not go into work. I ended up exhausting my savings. I ended up having to live in a shelter. I had a client, of some notoriety, who saw where I was coming from one morning and basically told my boss that she was no longer comfortable with me transacting business on her account. And one of the things, especially when you work in banking, is trust. You have to have people have trust in you. You have to be a trustworthy candidate. And once that starts to go, there's a lot of things that come over the side. You get asked a lot of questions. People look at you askance. And so it's no longer a comfortable place to work. Things continued to go from there, and eventually I ended up having to leave that job as well. So I mentioned before that I spent all that time in banking. So the very first night that I was homeless, I come home to Brooklyn to the eviction notice and the chain on the door. I'm wearing my two-piece suit, my tie, I got my tie clip, I got my work bag. And I couldn't see myself going to a shelter. The shelters were big, scary, and dangerous. And I looked like fresh meat. So I decided to take the train. The New York City subway system has some of the longest running routes if you know where to catch them. So that particular night I actually took the A train and I took it all the way from the first stop to the last stop. So Upper Manhattan to Far Rockaway and back about 3 times. And that's how I got through that night. The next day I went to the intake shelter. It's this big, gothic, dark, scary looking building. And you go in and the first thing that happens that nobody tells you about is they go through all your stuff. Lovely, humiliating, and embarrassing all at the same time. Then you get put into a pile of people that go through what's called intake. It was actually assigned to me in my permanent shelter and I stayed there for the next several months. I was able to work on my own and get myself out of that environment. I found a job working for a storage company. I started renting a room. Unfortunately, after about 6 months, I got ill again. And I wasn't able to go into work. I wasn't able to make my rent. And so I had to go back into the shelter system. I changed some of the information on my forms. I gave them more detailed information about my situation, including the fact that I dealt with mental illness. So this now actually had me be reassigned to another shelter called a mental health shelter, okay? And you think in the interim while you're traveling that it's great and it's cool and it's gonna take care of you, but what you find out when you get there is that you're in a dorm with 25 other people with mental health issues and they're all not the same. The first night that I arrived in my new mental health shelter in the Bronx, I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning to a guy screaming because he had night terrors. He proceeded to do that every night, every 2 a.m. for the next 6 months, just to give you an idea of the experience. After about 18 months there, I was actually able to get put in touch with a program called Urban Pathways that allowed me into one of their transitional housing buildings, which is actually the final step in the entire process before you're able to get an apartment of your own. So I mentioned earlier about the shelter system. I just want to give you a little bit more in depth about how that works, okay? Primarily what we're talking about is a congregate shelter, okay? And these are dormitory style setups depending on what's going on. Some shelters are huge, like Ward's Island or the Armory, where you're gonna get 50, 60, 100 people sharing a space in a dormitory living together. Depending on the location, you might have bathrooms in your dormitory. You might have 2 or 3 bathrooms per floor. If you have a bathroom in your dorm, there's usually a shower in each. So for example, when I was in the mental health shelter, I was in a 20-man dorm with 2 bathrooms, 2 showers. There's something about the sounds and smells of like 20 guys doing things all at the same time that do strange things to your psyche. There's the whole pecking order of figuring out who's going to get up first in the morning and have first dibs to the bathroom, because the bathroom doesn't get any cleaner and it's only serviced once a day by an outside company if they come. You're worrying about bedding. You're worrying about getting down for breakfast. Most shelter locations clients have to exit the building between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. You're not allowed back in the building barring an emergency until 4 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock in some locations. So you're trying to find things to do all day. Mental health shelters are not delineated by types of mental health. So, you could have a person that suffers from schizophrenia, and a person that suffers from anxiety, and a person that suffers from manic depression, literally all sleeping next to each other. And I don't even have the amount of time to explain how different people's mental illnesses feed off each other and just makes an untenable situation even worse. But even now, I'm in transitional housing, and I have to say, when I first signed my lease, I was ecstatic because I was no longer in the shelter system. I was an apartment holder. However, it's not always the best situation. In fact, a lot of times you'll find and you'll hear from a lot of people experiencing homelessness that these aren't the safest buildings. They're not the most well put together buildings. They're not the most well maintained buildings. And unfortunately, oftentimes this is true. So while I am thankful and grateful not to be in a shelter, there are things and situations that I'm dealing with now that are equally frustrating. I know I mentioned before that I was going to be one of those guys that was never going to be homeless. And then, like I said, life happened. And one of the things that helped me understand was that homelessness can happen to everyone. I think that's one misconception that people have, that you just chose to be a bum. Living in New York, I realized that and I come to learn that there are other things that play into homelessness. The fact that there are folks that age out of the foster care system and have no place else to go. That you have a lot of artists and creative folks that take their shot in New York and they end up with no place to go. That you have folks that are discharged from mental ill care facilities and they have no place else to go. You have folks who have very, very, very serious family issues and they have no place else to go. One of the most common yet frustrating questions I deal with folks that knew me a few years back is, oh, what happened? A lot of times it's asked with that sense of, what did you do wrong? How did you get off the plan? And that wasn't what it was. Nothing happened. Life happened. I think you just take a step back and realize there's a person with a problem, just like it'd be a health problem or a marital problem or whatever, and address it from that point of view and not the, oh, what did you do wrong? There's no standard for what homelessness looks like. Again, it's something that happens to people and then they have to deal with it. So when I hear about crime, especially from those that are homeless, or in the homeless community, it frustrates me, it outrages me, because that's not who we are. And unfortunately, for the most part, that we're all going to be painted with that brush. And that's another major misconception that we have to deal with. One of the things that you may not realize is that the person working across from you in the office is dealing with homelessness. Homelessness is just not having a permanent home address. Sometimes I'll get, okay, well, what can I do? Giving money helps, but what the biggest thing, the most important, especially in this city, people can do? Get informed, Exercise your political will. There's a lot of song and dance and things that are just said, and it sounds good in the State of the City address or in an op-ed piece in the Post, but there's no follow-up. There's nothing ever done. So now these people that you vote for, write your congressman, write your city councilman. What are we doing? How can we help? What are you doing? Are we instituting policies that are homeless friendly or not? And it can be homeless friendly and still be anti-crime. There are levels to everything. So are we having incredibly nuanced discussions? Are we having discussions with folks experiencing homelessness, asking them what they want and need? Or are we just doing what we want to do to make ourselves feel good? There are a lot of things like that. Just when questions need to be asked, I can't ask them because they don't want to hear from me, but they'll want to hear from you because for whatever reason, in that political cachet, you're worth more. So please help me out by doing that. So to wrap up, thank you for taking the time to watch my story. It's really important for me to be able to deliver that. One of the things that frustrates me the most is when people feel afraid to ask or they don't want to ask about my experience, and it's really okay. I'm not ashamed. It's something that happened to me and I'm dealing with it. And I love and appreciate the ability to share my story with you. In fact, it's one of the things that I love the most about Knock Knock Give Us Up, the fact that I can help take away the stigma around homelessness by promoting these type of interactions. It's really important for me that you be able to get to know us.